Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It, presented to you by Fireside. I'm your host, Terry Woolman, and my guest today is comedian Cathy Ladman. I appreciate you so much joining us every week, and I'd like to share with you my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well, without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance. And don't forget to have fun along the way. Cathy Ladman is a stand-up comedian, television writer, and actress. She was a featured comic on HBO's One Night Stand, a guest on The Tonight Show on 9 occasions, and a guest on The Late Late Show 6 times. Cathy has appeared in films like The Aristocrats, My Fellow Americans, White Oleander, and 2 Mike Nichols films, What Planet Are You From? And Charlie Wilson's War. Her television appearances include the hit shows Roseanne, Dr. Katz Professional Therapist, Caroline in the City in a recurring role, Everybody Loves Raymond, and Pretty Little Liars. Her TV writing credits include The King of Queens, The Carolyn Ray Show, and Roseanne. Ladman describes her comedy as a self-probing, anxiety-venting vehicle for exposing personal neurosis. Her new show is called Does This Show Make Me Look Fat? Cathy Ladman, hi, and welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
And by the way, you look beautiful. I love our gray hair. Both of us have, we met years ago, and I think you look more magnificent than ever.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Yeah. How many years ago was that? That has to be like over 30 years ago.
You know, it was the Late Show on Fox with Ross Schaefer, who was the host.
Right.
And the only reason I remember the year which was 1988, was because my first album had come out that year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was 33 years ago.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Right.
I remember when I turned 33.
You do? I don't.
Yes. And I was on the phone with my sister back in New York. I was out in LA and I said, she said, happy birthday. I said, yeah, I'm 33, same age as Jesus. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, that's how old he was when he died. And she said, well, I hope you have a better year.
So you're not the only funny person in your family.
No, she's funny in a very different way, my sister.
Sure. Right.
I don't think she could ever do stand-up, but she's very funny.
Mm-hmm. Your mom and dad also, do they have a good sense of humor? Not as much.
My dad was very funny.
Yeah.
And, you know, my mom was funnier than I gave her credit for, I think. But they were real characters. So it was an interesting family to grow up in. Sure.
Was it the 4 of you, or were there other siblings?
I have 2 sisters. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. And so it was 5 of us. And a dog, always a dog.
Always a dog. And you still have a dog in your new home and your own family that you've made.
Yes.
I love dogs.
So,
God. We had a beagle growing up. What kind of dog did you have?
We had, first we had a Lakeland Terrier, a small, brown and black terrier. And then we had an Airedale, which was really big. He was a big dog. He was about 85 pounds, and he was great.
You grew up in New York. Were you in an apartment, a brownstone, or did you have a yard? How did that work with the dog?
We were in Queens, way out in Queens, towards Long Island. So we had a house. We lived in pretty much the suburbs. Yeah, we grew up in the suburbs.
Before we start, we have started, but I want to wish you a happy early birthday. Both of us are born in October.
I'm excited.
Yours is coming up October 15th. Yes. Yeah. So anyway, happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
You are excited? You love birthdays?
I love birthdays.
Me too.
I love my birthday so much. And I have nothing big planned, but I know I'll have fun. Whatever I end up doing, it'll be fun.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. We don't even know what we're doing yet, but we'll make it a fun day.
I mean,
Yeah.
last year I turned 65,
Right.
and it was I didn't do anything major because we were in COVID, and
Yeah. In
just
lockdown.
it just wasn't possible.
Hmm.
And I won't do anything major this year either. I mean, because I feel like we're still in that situation.
We are. I'm turning 65
Yeah,
in a couple of weeks also. So I'm a
right.
year behind you. And yeah, we're not going to make a big deal. It'd be lovely to gather with friends, but it's not the right time
Mm-mm,
to do
it's
that.
not. It's
Mm-mm.
really not.
So today we're going to be covering a lot of things, and we're going to be talking about comedy, obviously, acting, writing, family, change, which
Hmm.
I know is important to you, and also anorexia, which is part of your story.
Right.
Um, before we jump in there, I just want to remind people that you've been working for over 40 years in comedy, and you won
I
the
know.
40 years. That doesn't even make any sense,
Jeez.
right? I know.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
But you also won the 1992 American Comedy Award for Best Female Stand-Up Comic. That's pretty wonderful.
That was exciting.
Yeah.
That was exciting. I think that those awards lasted for several years, and they've been gone for a while now. But it was a real honor. It was
Hmm.
right, it was right when in the middle of when comedy was really booming,
Yeah. Yeah. It was popping.
and and there were clubs all over the place, and it was an exciting time. It was a real exciting time in my life and my career.
So has that changed? The music business has certainly changed in film and TV that we're both in, but stand-up comedy, does it feel,
Well, it's
how is
different
it the
for
same and
me.
how's it different?
It's different for me. I mean, I just, I've outgrown a lot of the venues that I used to play,
Hmm.
and I haven't quite found the next set of venues, because the next place for me to go is theaters, which I much prefer doing to comedy clubs.
Right.
But I don't draw enough to fill a theater. So that's why I came on your podcast.
So we can get some
I
bookings?
expect to fill a theater after
Okay.
this.
People, you heard it. Make it happen. My people out there.
But
Go
no,
ahead.
it's very hard to reach that next level if you don't have a regular TV show, or
Right.
you're not out there on the road all the time, which I haven't been for many years.
And are you finding it a different kind of a challenge to just be a regular on late night talk shows? Do they only look towards
Younger,
millennials
yes,
right now, or younger?
yes,
Unless again you're in a movie or a TV show
right,
where there's
right,
something to promote
right.
and
It's
talk
true.
about.
Yeah.
Have
Well,
you?
I'll have my show for that anyway.
Yeah, which
It'll be
which I want
exciting.
everybody to know about. It's I saw some excerpts of or read some things about it, and it's well, look, does this show make me look fat? I mean, that already has my curiosity, and it is funny, but the
Yes, I mean,
content's not.
my concern is that the title is funnier than the show, and but you only saw the second half of it.
Hmm.
So the first half, I think, has more comedy in it,
Oh, okay.
but there was a darkness in that second half and the content that just didn't lend itself to comedy.
Yeah. Well, that's because it's not funny.
No,
Health
it's just not.
health challenges are not funny.
No.
Let me give. Oh, by the way, we were talking about finding venues for you, and I'd love to see you in a theater too. But I would imagine that you're friends with George Wallace,
Yes.
comedian, and I am as well, and who I met back the same time I met you on doing the Late Show
Okay.
on Fox. But we've remained friends over the years, and
Oh, great.
but I've seen George do his show in Las Vegas in this cool,
Mhm.
tiny little room.
Right.
I mean, it's not tiny, but it's intimate.
Right.
And he's really enjoys it. So I
Yeah. I
wonder
mean,
if
is he still at the Paris, or did he change
he's back
venues?
at I don't know what he's doing right now with COVID,
Okay.
but I'm pretty he was at the Hilton.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I know is my wife sings with Barry Manilow, and they're
Oh.
there as well with a
So your wife
residency.
must know Larry Amorose.
Very well. Yes.
Yeah,
As a
I know
matter of fact,
Larry very well too.
Larry posted, I had promoted the show, and Larry wrote two of my favorite people,
Right,
Kathy
I
and
saw
you.
that.
So, yes, I know Larry really well. As a matter of fact, I invited him to join this conversation
Yes.
today, and he was already booked. So,
Oh, okay.
but he's fantastic.
Well, I met Larry before I started doing stand up in New York when I took a stand up class. He and I were in the same stand up class in New York City.
That's
And
great.
yeah, so he's the person I've known the longest from New York in
Right.
comedy.
He's a really gifted writer,
Yes.
as well as many other things, but he's
So
known as a
funny.
writer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love him. Well, that's so great that we have Larry in common as well.
Yeah.
So one of your things that I was reading about, and I've been a fan of yours for a long time, even before we had met years ago, but your thing is you draw laughter by poking fun at your own neurosis. And throughout your career on late night TV and your solo show Scaredy Pants and your HBO special One Night Stand, your latest show, Does This Show Make Me Look Fat? Your act centers on family, growing up, relationships, and real life from a very personal perspective. So one of the things that I'd read about you, it was a question in another article or interview, but you were asked, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? Do you remember how you answered that question?
So how did I answer that question?
The question was, what's the hardest thing you've
Yeah.
ever done? And your answer was to be true to myself. And it was in context of your new show and the writing and
Yes.
everything that you've been doing. So let's jump into the harder part of the conversation today.
Okay.
Because it's important. It's really relevant, especially with this Facebook blow up right now that's going on that I'll talk about in a moment as well. But you did a TED Med talk called, have you heard the one about the comic with anorexia? And I watched it. It was powerful. I thought it was beautiful in your honesty. It was funny because you were funny. But
it was tough. I did that at 9 a.m.
You did? So
yeah, that was
as
really
if it wouldn't be
hard.
tough anyway.
It was really hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you a late night person?
I'm actually not anymore. I used to be.
Right.
But I'm not. I get up very early now, and part of it is because my body just wants to wake up.
Right.
But doing comedy at 9 a.m. is not good.
Yeah.
It's just not the right time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you have said is, this is a quote of yours, anorexia is an eating disorder and also an addiction. The disorder manifests with food and the addiction is perfection.
Yes.
Can you talk about that for a second?
Well, I think that I think that I do have an addiction to perfection, and I certainly did. I mean, I still do. I consider myself recovering and not recovered. And I think that one of the manifestations of my perfectionism is my obsession with food and not eating it and losing weight and being the skinniest person around. I mean, that used to be my goal, was to be the thinnest person in the room. I don't know why I had to latch on to that. And there are many theories about it. I mean, many people scientifically feel that it is attached to your chromosomes, that you're predisposed to it. Some people think it's more of a societal manifestation. I think it's a combination of both. That's what I think. And I'm not alone in thinking that.
That makes sense to me. I would agree with you on that, not having personally experienced it, but it just makes sense to me.
You look at what I grew up with, and this is part of my show, how I become obsessed with models in magazines,
right,
and wanting to look like them. And look what I grew up with Twiggy. That was her name,
Right.
Twiggy.
Right.
That was like, that was presented to us as a great thing to be, to look like a twig.
Right. Yeah, this was a celebrity British model,
Wow.
supermodel.
In the 60s.
In the 60s, I remember. You know, you're talking about this addiction to perfection, and you know, as you were saying that, my question to you is: aren't all artists addicted to perfection in some way, or people that are successful? I mean, this is a different manifestation, but I mean, that's my addiction, is trying to be
Right.
great at what I do as a
Yeah,
musician, as an artist.
But I think that there are gradations of it. And I think that when it becomes obsessive and compulsive, and I think that I had an acting teacher that said, we live for the mistakes. The
Right.
mistakes are where you find the great stuff.
The magic.
And yeah. And, to avoid mistakes at all costs is short-sighted. And I think that if you're only striving for perfectionism, then you're missing out on a lot along the way, a lot along the journey. It's funny. I remember this. I was in the 4th grade, I think, and we took a field trip to the United Nations. We had great field trips in New York because we had great places to go.
I'd imagine.
And we were in one of the buildings, and there was a huge tapestry, probably about 2 stories high on a wall. And the guide was telling us about the fact that there were 3 mistakes woven into the tapestry intentionally to signify that only God is perfect. And
that's fantastic.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
but
whatever,
then years
right.
later, I thought, well, if only God is perfect, then why did the mistakes have to be intentional? Wouldn't they have just happened anyway? And I could, obviously, this many years later, I couldn't find that woman to ask her.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
but
It's a great question.
I think that's rather, I don't know, like narcissistic to think that we have to make these mistakes intentionally and that they won't just happen.
Right, because the humanity, the human aspect of us is to be imperfect.
Yes. So I think that striving for perfection is denying your humanity.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way, and that makes sense. It's healthy to strive for perfection, I think, to become if you look at the world's greatest athletes, Olympians and professional sports figures, our peers, who work in comedy and music and acting and in the creative field, the journey is the striving. I think where people trip up is where they think that they're supposed to achieve perfection. Right.
And to think that you've already arrived, that you arrive someplace, and you never really arrive anywhere. It's a continuum.
Right. I mean, you're saying that, and people who don't know you personally probably have looked at you and say, oh, she's this really famous, successful comedian, actress. I've seen her in all these big movies and on TV, and I see her writing credits, and she's made it. We were talking briefly previously about the name of the show, making it, and what that actually means there. I've never said this on the show before, but I don't think there's the show's not called Made It. It's called Making It.
Right.
It's a process.
But it has this little, when I said it out loud to my friend Mindy, whom you know.
Yes. Mindy Sterling.
Mindy Sterling, who she and I are about to do a podcast together, actually. I said, it's called Making It with Terry Wollman. And it was like, wait a second, what am I saying? I'm not making it with Terry Wollman.
No, we're just friends.
So,
Yeah. Well,
Yes, but
it's a
it is
provocative title.
making it, not made it. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And okay, so let's talk. You mentioned being deeply influenced by, like Twiggy, for example, this
Hmm.
skin and bones
Right.
supermodel who was very pretty but very skinny.
Hmm.
Looking at magazines, there's a current story that is happening now. I saw this on the news yesterday. There's a woman named Frances Haugen who's a whistleblower right now for Facebook. She was hired to be the lead product manager of the civic misinformation team. And she was just called, which basically was to monitor the ethics essentially of Facebook, the company that hired her, and to improve, their system, or so she thought. That's what she was hired for. Uh, but she was called to testify before the U.S. Senate's Commerce Subcommittee on the risk this company's products, Facebook and Instagram, pose to children.
Mm.
Lawmakers called the hearing in response to a Wall Street Journal story based on documents showing that Facebook was aware that the damage that Instagram was causing to teen mental health and well-being, it was doing this. And even one survey and research that she submitted estimated that 30% of teenage girls felt that Instagram made them dissatisfied with their body. And that was by using algorithms leading them to pages literally with names like eternally starved, skin and bones,
Oh,
and I have to be
Jesus.
thin. I found that
Oh,
horrifying. And I know that must make you sick to your stomach,
it's
literally.
horrible. And there are also these websites. They're called pro-ana websites. They're
Pro Anna?
pro-anorexia,
Oh,
pro-ana,
wow.
pro-anorexia. And they encourage you to, it's like cheerleading to become anorexic, to be anorexic. You can do it. You can eat less. You can do it,
Well, I'm grateful that the Senate is actually looking into this,
Hmm.
and looking at holding companies accountable for putting commerce over
Oh, it's
morality.
horrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And you don't see men being, I mean, there are men who are anorexic and bulimic,
Hmm.
but certainly nowhere near as prevalent as the number of women.
Which is also a sad piece of information, because I learned from watching your presentation that anorexia has the highest death rate of any mental illness, up to 20%, which is
It does,
1 out of 5
yes.
people.
That's a lot. It's probably one of the highest death rates of any illness.
I didn't know that. So as all of our lives are, your life is a work in progress. And so is your
Mhm.
health, your physical health, as is mine and as everybody's. And we all have our challenges. Yeah. That we are born with or gifted by
Right.
our
Right.
circumstances. But you've also made this beautiful life for yourself. You have a family, you're married, you have a daughter, a
Yes.
dog. You
Yes.
live you live in a nice part of the world,
Yes, I do live in
and
a nice part of the world.
and
I
you were.
don't love where we live in
Mhm.
the actual space, but I do love where we live, the outdoors part of it. I
Right.
love it.
And you spend a lot of time outdoors with your family?
I
Do you?
do. Well, I walk a lot.
Right.
My husband is not an outdoors person at all.
Mhm.
I mean, I live with two people who really like to be by themselves,
Oh, that's
and I
interesting.
am a people person,
Right.
and that is hard.
Yeah.
It's definitely hard. So I find my people to be with, and I walk a lot. I love being outdoors walking,
Hmm.
and I just like being outdoors. I love it. I mean, I don't climb mountains or anything like that, and I'm not like the most. I mean, I don't play a lot of sports, but I
Hmm.
just love being outdoors. I
It,
do.
it right. It's healing. To
It is
be
healing, and I and
outdoors.
I I also I do a lot of good thinking when I'm walking.
Oh, I do too. I write
Yeah.
songs sometimes when I'm walking, or
Yes.
lyrics, or kind of just figure things out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so that's so interesting. So your daughter in that way is more like her dad than you, in being
Definitely.
sort of private and
Mm-hmm.
and not as social as you.
Yeah, and it gets lonely. It definitely gets lonely, and that's why
Well,
my dog and I are so close.
yeah, I would imagine. I mean,
Yes.
I laughed, but I mean that makes it even harder when, again, we're in a pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to. So many people are isolated, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and not being able to reach out and connect physically, and really touch and hug their friends and get out and
Yeah.
have some fun. And um, so, which is, I don't know where you stand with this, but I'm just keep encouraging people to vaccinate and mask up and wash your hands and
Oh
just
God,
just
absolutely. I think
wake
you
up
know
and be
where I
careful.
stand with this, Terry.
I would expect. Yeah,
I think you. Yes.
I
I
do.
mean,
Well,
wouldn't I shock you if I said otherwise?
you would, but I
Yes.
would listen as to why. Yeah, but yeah, I
Okay.
would be shocked if you weren't
Yes.
that way, because you take care of yourself, and that's where I'm going with this. Like, you have
Yeah.
built this beautiful life. You are healthy. You are. I again, I understand that it is a continuing work in progress to stay healthy,
Yes.
especially your relationship with your weight or body image or
Yes.
food.
Yes.
Um, but what would you say? And this is a spontaneous question, but
Okay.
again, because you were talking about how deeply you were impacted by images and magazines, and now there's all this other stuff going on with Instagram and Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and everything, and certainly still magazines and billboards and
Yes.
photoshopping and everything. What?
And TV and movies.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to young girls right now who are feeling like they're too skinny? As a matter of fact, I've read that that you had even had this conversation, or you wrote about your relationship with your daughter when she was younger, and
Mm-hmm.
this idea that she thought she was fat, and you wanted to not be dismissive. You
Right.
wanted to listen, which I thought was wonderful parenting. By the way, it might not have felt like it. You
Oh,
might have been,
thanks.
fighting your own demons, but I thought that's
Right.
like beautifully self-aware to be, saying, "Okay, sweetie," like not just blowing her off and telling her something that
Right.
she believed. But what do you say? What did you say to your daughter? What would you say now to these little girls who think that they're supposed to be unhealthy, skin, so thin
That's
that
the
they could
word.
die?
That's the word. It's unhealthy. It's
Okay,
unhealthy, and that's what's not spoken about.
right,
It's people are trying to sell things, and they found a market
right,
that will pay
right,
for these results, and these are very unhealthy. And this is not where this is not what makes you special. This is not the thing that makes you special. That's only a part of who you are,
right,
and you want to be a kind person, you want to be a creative person, you want to be a good friend, there are so many things that are more important than what your body looks like.
yeah,
And it just infuriates me, the emphasis that's put on that, how it can lead young girls down such a dangerous path.
hmm
And there was something else I was going to say, and I completely forgot what it was.
You can,
Um,
when you remember it, just bring it back
right.
into the
Okay.
conversation.
Okay.
Thanks for being so honest about that. Can you tell people where they can find uh, your the talk that we were talking about, the TED Med, and anything else that you want? And Lisa can put it up.
You
Lisa,
can
if you
go to
don't
my
mind.
website. That's probably the easiest way to do it, is go to my
Okay,
website, which is cathyladman.com, spelled like my name is spelled.
great.
And it has both of those things on it.
Great. Yeah, I really encourage everybody to watch these, as well as the funny stuff.
Yeah,
The
the funny
actual,
stuff is great.
yeah,
The funny stuff is great.
which I want to talk about now, and
Okay.
then it's all inclusive because this is all you. So
Right.
I want to talk about just you growing up, and so you grew up in New York,
Mm-hmm.
three girls in the
3
family. You were
girls.
the
I'm the
youngest,
youngest. Yes.
and you had said that you had 3 majors in college:
Yes.
English education, media and communication, and
Starvation.
And starvation, the third.
Yes. And I got A's in all of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
It's okay. It is funny, Lisa.
It's
And
hysterical.
yeah. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is I read that your first job after college was you worked at an ad agency. So
Well, that's a bit of a cheat.
Okay,
My
thanks
first
for
job,
straightening that.
job after college was actually I was an English teacher, but because of the construction of the show, I jumped to the ad agency job. So I just wanted to be
Got it.
honest about that.
Oh, thank you.
I was 20 years old when I started teaching.
Was that your plan? I mean, when you were a kid
no,
or when you were in college?
I told my mother what I wanted to do, and she immediately,
Which is to be a comic?
yes. And
Yeah.
she said, well, I think you should do something to get something to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was not encouraged by either of my parents to do what I wanted to do.
I wasn't either, really. I was encouraged to be great at whatever I did, like, assert or focus.
Right.
But they weren't thrilled about the idea of me being in the arts. So I can relate.
Yeah, my parents were very
Concern?
very concerned about that, and I was encouraged to study education, which I did, and I taught for 1 year, and it was very clear to me that I didn't want to do this for my life.
Right.
And that's when I went out and embarked on I had one false move to LA, where I lasted for 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it started off well. You drove cross country with your dad, which
Yes,
sounds
which
like
was
it was
great. It was great, and it was very healing for our relationship, because the beginnings of our relationship were not very good.
So, well, that's a blessing.
Yeah,
In that,
definitely.
because a road trip can go either way.
It can, but it's really, I was on a TV show one time with him. He was on the show with me, and we both said that's the best memory we have of each other, of our time together, was taking that trip together. It was really special.
I'm so glad that you had that. So
Me too.
I'm always curious, and talk about this with many guests, like, what was your first year like when you moved to New York, LA, Paris, wherever you live, but to like set off on your journey.
Right.
So what was your first year like? And 4 months of it was obviously very challenging. It didn't go the way you expected.
Right. It was terrible. I was still very much in my disease.
Okay.
And I found a place to live. I had a very hard time finding a job. I found a job that sucked, and I got into a car accident. And then I said, that's it. I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was afraid to go near a comedy club. I came out to LA to do stand-up, and I was afraid to go near a comedy club. So I obviously was not ready yet.
So, like, you didn't go meet Mitzi or go to the Improv and meet Bud
I knew Jerry Seinfeld and I have known each other since I was 15 and he was 16.
Did you go to school together, or?
No, we went on a teen tour to Israel together.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
The summer of 71. And he was my very first love. He was my first boyfriend. And when I told him what I wanted to do, we both used to talk about in 1971, we used to both talk about wanting to be comedians. And I used to talk about wanting to be a comedian, and I told him that he would make a great comedian. And I was right.
Yeah, you were.
And
so was he about you.
Anyway, thank you. He introduced me to his friends, Larry Miller, and he gave me Jay Leno's contact info. He gave me George Wallace's contact info in LA, because George had just come out here to write on the Red Fox show, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And he was being paid $1,000 a week. $1,000 a week. So I went to visit him, and I just, I wasn't really ready. I just wasn't ready to approach it. It was too much for me. I was skin and bones, and I didn't have a support system.
Right.
Really, I didn't have a strong enough support system. And when my parents came to visit me in LA, they took a trip to the Pacific Northwest and they swung down to visit me in LA. And I told them, I said, I'm miserable here. I want to come back to New York. So I came back to New York. And then I spent a good, I would say 3 years just struggling. I got that job at the ad agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job at a cosmetics company, and then I finally said I saw Jerry on the Tonight Show. I just happened to, he and I we hadn't been in touch for about a year or so, and I turned on the TV and watched the Tonight Show. It was even hard for me to watch late night shows because I wanted to be a comic so much, but I was so afraid to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned on the TV and I saw Johnny introduced a comic making his national network debut, Jeff Seinfeld, he said. And I said, that has to be Jerry. That just has to be Jerry. So, and indeed it was Jerry. And I saw him and I called and left a message for him. I didn't have I thought he must have moved out to Los Angeles since he was on the Tonight Show. That's how naive I was. I thought, well, if you're on the Tonight Show, you must live in LA.
Right. So people don't know. They used to send an airplane ticket to
yes,
and a hotel and
yes,
a little limo ride and pay you scale to be on the show.
Exactly. So I called LA Information and I actually got Jerry's number. He did indeed live in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him, I left a message for him and told him I had seen him and how wonderful he was. And I got a message from him the next day saying how thrilled he was that I had seen it, that if there was anyone he had wanted to see it was I.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was coming to New York the following week and we got together. I made him dinner and I told him how much I wanted to be a stand-up comic and I was too scared. And he said, you would be a great stand-up comic. And then that's when I signed up for that stand-up class where I met Larry Amorous. And that was it. And then I didn't look back.
So was it terrifying getting on stage or just totally fun because you just were so excited to be finally doing it?
It was terrifying.
It was? Yeah.
It was terrifying. Yes, it's very scary to do stand-up.
Well, it's very intimate, exposed. I mean, you're up there by yourself.
Yes.
You're not behind a piano or a guitar or, you're just up there.
Right. And your main goal is to elicit laughter. And if you don't achieve it, it's glaringly obvious.
Right.
It's not like drama.
And it's like a feeding frenzy. Like people love to see people squirm or fail. Mm-hmm. It's like slowing down for a car accident or something just to see somebody.
It's so awful,
well,
but it's true.
Part of there's that imperfection of humanity.
Yes.
Again, there's that little just something not quite right where people like to see other people suffer.
Right.
It makes them feel better about themselves or something. I don't know.
Well, maybe they just it was interesting because I just went to see the immersive Van Gogh exhibit.
Oh, how is it?
I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't like it. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. It's many of his paintings animated with set to music, and I thought it was really beautiful. And I have always loved Van Gogh. I used to have a portrait of him on my nightstand, and I had a great affinity for him. And I think that one of the reasons that he's such a popular artist is not only that his work is so gorgeous, but that he suffered, and that I think that people relate to that. Right. They relate to the suffering.
Yeah, that makes sense. So by the way, did you already have writing chops? Could you have gotten a job like some of your friends writing comedy, or being...
You mean before I did stand-up?
Yeah, or you needed to really have that experience?
No, I wanted to be a performer. That was my goal. I never wanted to be a comedy writer. I wanted to be a performer.
Well, that answers one of my questions. I was wondering if you find yourself more comfortable in front of the camera or behind the scenes.
I like being in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I'm most excited and thrilled, and where I lose track of time.
You've always, as long as I can remember seeing you on camera, on all the late night show appearances that you used to do, even before we had first met.
Right.
You always just seemed so comfortable and confident and that you were enjoying yourself.
It's true. I love being there, and I
Mhm.
love doing television.
Yeah.
I love doing television. Television takes a lot. There's a lot of the danger of live stand up is not there when you're doing TV. You don't have to worry about hecklers. You don't have to worry about if a drink is going to drop.
Yeah.
Glass is going to fall and
Or if the
break.
blender is louder than you are. Yeah. At the bar.
You don't have to worry about any of that stuff, and that's great.
And also, I think you've already won. As soon as you walk out on the stage, they're already in
Yes.
love with you and they're excited to see you.
They want to see you do well.
Yeah.
They want to see you do well. Clubs are different, but clubs are a great training ground.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you know how to handle that, then you'll be able to handle TV. But there are certain people, I think, who do better in clubs than TV.
Oh yeah.
Just the nature of their acts.
Right. And it doesn't mean they're any less. That's just where they
it's
come
just
alive.
a different tone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you remember one time on the Late Show when Zsa Zsa Gabor was on with me?
Yes.
She was so awful.
Yes.
What happened was, it was with Ross.
Yeah,
Ross was the
Schaefer.
host.
Yeah.
And they gave me some questions before the show. They gave me some questions that I might be posed to me about Zsa Zsa, and it was like, the question was, which one of Zsa Zsa's husbands would you have wanted to be married to? And I ended up saying Conrad Hilton, because I really like Small Soap. And then we cut to commercial, and she was furious. And then we came back from the commercial. She said, Ross started talking about something. She said, I just want to say something, that my husband, Conrad Hilton, was a lovely man, and he was no Small Soap. She thought it was like I was like making fun of his anatomy or something.
Right.
And then she refused to sit with me on the panel. She had to go elsewhere on the stage, and I had to sit with the Ross.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, she sat with Ross when he did his next stuff, and I sat on the panel.
I do remember that. And that from my perspective, that might have been one of those moments where in my headset they were going, cue the band, go to commercial. Yes. Somebody yelling at me because there was that moment of complete discomfort.
Yes. Yeah. And then I remember going downstairs where the dressing rooms and everything were, and hearing all the guys from the stage coming down and say, I don't know how dirty you can be on this show, but
you can say anything. Yeah.
Well, I heard people saying bitch, cunt, just like about Zsa Zsa, that she was so awful. She was so awful.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember she got really mean and icy, and we had a few of those, where yeah. As a matter of fact, I think there was one time where Ross had another guest. What was his name? Wally George, I think. He was very controversial.
Oh, Wally George. Yeah, it's so funny.
He was insulting the audience, and Ross just said, okay, you're done. Let's go to commercial. And he kicked him off the show.
Well, that was Wally George's thing.
Yes, of course.
I mean, that was his. Yeah. But what was funny is that when I went up to Jay Leno's house one time, this is an old house of his. Larry Miller and I went up to his house. This was before I was doing stand-up. And Jay was watching Wally George's show, and I forget the name of the show. And it was an Orange County-based show. And Jay put a big pot over his head, and so it sounded like long distance. And he was talking to Wally George, and he was making Wally George laugh. You could see him trying to not break on camera, and it was so funny. Oh my God!
I want to talk. These are great memories. I'd forgotten about all of these. I want to talk about your web store and your website too, because there's some funny things up there. And Lisa, also, we can certainly take questions and comments from the audience as well.
Certainly.
But you have some merch on your website.
Very little merch.
A little bit. There's the Live in Cleveland CD.
Yes.
Mom or Nuts book, but you've got some t-shirts and hats and accessories.
Yes.
And there's 4 categories. So I've got them in front of me, but I would imagine that you know what the sayings are. So one of
I
them is,
forget, to tell you the
okay,
truth.
can I read them then? I didn't want to
Yes.
take your thunder by saying what.
No, tell me.
So one of them is marriage. And basically the saying is, the key to a successful marriage is lowering your expectations. You can get this on a t-shirt, a coffee mug, a hat. Menopause. It's a lot like adolescence without all that life ahead of you, which I've heard you use in some of
Yes.
your stand-up.
Yes.
Religion. This one's priceless. All religions are the same. They're basically guilt with different holidays.
Yes, that's a centerpiece of my act. Yes.
And then the Grand Canyon which is the Grand Canyon, the space between Arizona's ears. So go buy yourself a t-shirt. The holidays are coming up, or a coffee mug. I thought that they were pretty clever. Do you have any others in the works?
Not right now, but there are several lines from my act that would lend themselves. Like there's one, and I say in my act that I wrote this anniversary card that goes, "Happy anniversary. I have no one to blame but myself." And there are various. I said I have some other lines in my act that would lend themselves well to t-shirts, but I guess I haven't thought about that in a while.
Yeah,
My mind is elsewhere.
Of course. I want to ask you before we open up for questions. There's so many shows that you've been on that I was curious about, in films, and I guess it's a two-part question. One is, do you prefer? Do you have preferences? I get asked this. Do you prefer to be in a studio recording, or you're writing music, or being on a stage or on TV? But between stand-up comedy and doing movies, which is a different time frame, than doing TV shows, doing television shows, being in a writing room, with another collective creative group of people. Do you have well, I know you want to be on stage, but but you're still performing and acting on these other shows. Do you prefer one over the other, or how are they the same? How are they different for you?
There are several things there, though.
Yes.
We're talking about writing.
Well, how do they inform each other? Does being in a writing room make you, writing for TV? Does that make it easier for you, or make you better at when somebody asks you to do a recurring role on their sitcom? Or are they kind of separate for you?
I think they're kind of separate for me.
Okay.
I really do. Working with people is great. I do love working with people. I guess it's one of the downsides of stand-up, is that it can be a pretty lonely endeavor. And I do like working on a staff for that reason. Because
the collaborative aspect of it.
Yes, I really do like that. And as a matter of fact, I tried writing my show on my own, and I found it much, much more enjoyable and successful writing it with my co-author, Laura Coyle, who's also directing it. And I do like collaborating. I like being with people. So there's that aspect of it.
And film versus TV? Do you...
Gosh, it depends on what type of TV. Like, I like single camera TV as opposed to multi-camera TV. I don't like the conventional sitcom paradigm as much as I like the single camera, which is more like a movie,
right?
In its tone and it's the way that it's shot also. I guess I don't watch network sitcoms anymore. They just, for the most part, don't interest me. Do you?
No, not as much. I find myself, leaning towards series on Netflix, or things that that I hear about from friends or read about.
Right.
That are innovative, exciting, different.
Have you watched the other two?
No.
It's on, where's it airing now? Oh boy, I think it's airing on Netflix. I think it's with
The other
Molly
two?
Shannon. The other
Okay.
two,
Oh,
Molly.
yeah. I think that is Netflix.
Yeah, she's the mom
Hmm.
of three kids. The youngest one becomes this real huge internet sensation. He's 13,
I read about this.
and the other two are a daughter who used to be a dancer and now sells real estate, and just moved and is squatting in one of her properties because she just broke up with her boyfriend and has no
Hmm.
place to live.
Hmm.
And then the other one is an actor slash waiter, and it's just very, very, very funny. It's so well written, so creatively shot. It's really good.
Thank you for the recommendation. I will go
Sure,
check it out. Uh, we've been watching Ted Lasso, which
that's
which
great.
I think is wonderful, like surprisingly wonderful. And my
Yes,
favorite parts are the throwaways, the
yes,
asides. Like that coach will say all these cultural references about
yes.
some TV show from the '60s or acting
Right.
or things you would not expect to come out of his
Yeah, it's a
mouth. So
great show.
yeah, I find that I enjoy those things. Um, I know I keep saying I want to open this up for questions, but I also I want to ask you about being. I think you were on Oprah one time. It was one of
Oh
your
yeah,
credits.
years ago. Yes.
What was that like? Was it just life changing or wonderful or interesting or just
Well, I
another
mean,
show? It's an interview.
it was great because I got to meet Tom Hanks, and then I worked with him again
Great.
in Charlie Wilson's War. Although,
Hmm.
I mean, I had nothing of a part in that movie, but I got to, I mean, I was talking to him, and he used to take his son to eat at the bowling alley coffee shop where I used to go eat with my friends, and we were talking about that place.
Nice.
And um, what was I saying? I completely lost it. What was your question?
Just about being on Oprah, but you
Oh,
just
right.
answered it.
So, yeah,
Just getting to connect with
yeah, but
Tom.
she was
Yeah,
she was a little ornery.
she was. Okay.
She really was. I think she was on a diet, and she was not very, when the cameras were off, she was not very pleasant,
Right.
which was kind of disappointing.
Yeah. It's so interesting with all the celebrities that uh, we we have worked with or interacted with.
Hmm.
Uh, it's always extra special when somebody turns out to be just incredibly
Right,
great and warm
right. But
and
maybe she just had a bad day,
oh yeah, or
It's
she's handling her
possible.
business or
Yeah,
producing a
yeah.
network or
But it wasn't this incredible. I mean, what was fun is that I was working in Massachusetts, and I had to get
Mhm.
up really early to fly to Chicago to do the show. And then I went to O'Hare afterwards, and so many people recognized me from that morning
Right.
on Oprah. It
Just
was
walking through the
unbelievable.
airport.
I mean,
That's
yeah,
pretty cool. That's
yeah, it
badass.
was
Right.
wild. I mean,
Yeah.
the reach that she has is
Hmm.
staggering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, are there questions, comments from you or from our audience members?
First of all, I don't even know what to call it. It's not deja vu. I'm having like one of those moments where you go back through your life because I'm like literally remembering how many times I have seen Cathy
Hmm. Yeah.
do her stand up. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm freaking out just a little bit, but I'm being really freaking cool about it.
It's
Because
funny.
I've always loved comedy and thought
Yeah.
about doing it. But when you're a kid, when I was a kid, because I'm 59, there weren't a lot of female comedians that you could see
Hmm.
on television.
Right.
And so your face, like even now, I recognized you. I was like, oh crap, I know exactly who she is.
Right.
Oh, that's funny.
So thank you for sticking with it. And I'm also a
Oh.
recovering perfectionist.
Oh,
I
okay,
do things
good.
and I just stand up and tell, raise your hand. I'm a recovering perfectionist. And it is a thing. But Terry asked about, are all creatives basically artists or musicians, are we all that way? And I think there's this difference between wanting to strive for excellence, right? And thinking that perfection actually exists.
Hmm.
Yes.
Because perfectionism is like this, it's a false sense of reality. It really just doesn't even
Yes.
exist. So like I
Agreed.
aim now to be like an optimalist. Like what's the best version of me that I can be?
Right.
And I know I'm going to F something up and just be like, oh yeah, it's coming. And you'll still be okay.
Right. I mean, like the best version of you could be you tripping up the stairs. I mean, that
Right.
could be the best, that could be the golden moment,
So, question, what
Yes.
was your, and I hate to use the word worst, but it's the only one I can come up with. What was your most harrowing or worst, or the stand-up routine where you go, okay, that was the one where I fell on my face and I got up and recovered from it, and that's when I knew
I can
they're
tell you
not
when
going to
that
take me
was.
out.
I was in Los Angeles. I was shooting a scene from in the movie Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And I was going to go do a stand-up show, a live TV stand-up show in London. So as soon as I finished shooting, and I say it because I got no sleep. I went from the location to the airport, flew overnight to London. Then the night that I arrived, I had to run my set for the producers, and they said, "Well, we like the material, but we want it in a different order." And I'm working on no sleep now.
Right.
So they told me the order that they wanted it, and I'm trying to remember it, and I'm trying to create segues in my mind, and so I go on this show. I'm introduced. I do my first joke, and I went completely blank. And this was a live show. Went completely blank, and I put my head in my hands, and I went, "My mother, my mother, my mother." And I thought of a joke, and I did another joke. And towards the end of that joke, I thought of another joke. And I did one joke at a time, just like this. Every single joke I was supposed to do in a completely mishmash order. And I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was absolutely devastated. And when my manager and I went back to watch a re-airing of it that night, it wasn't terrible. It honestly was not terrible.
I'm
And
not
I
surprised to hear you
survived it.
say that.
I survived it. Definitely.
Love it. Thank you for that.
Sure.
That's a great question, Lisa, and a even better answer, because you actually didn't have to think about it. You knew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
came-
That was the
experience.
most traumatic thing
Yeah.
that had ever happened to me. Yeah.
So my closing questions
Yes.
that I ask all of my guests are, since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you both personally and professionally?
Me?
You.
Me first? Okay.
Yeah. You only.
Me only.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're the
Me
guest.
first. Me first and only. Okay. To me, it means doing things that I'm afraid to do. That's what it means. And all along the way, there have always been things that I've been afraid to do, that I've wanted to do, and fear has kept me from doing them. So that to me is more important than anything.
Mhm.
I mean, it's nice if you're paid well to do it, but that's not the thing.
Right.
The thing is being creatively challenged and taking on that challenge.
Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Tenacity,
Mm-hmm.
learning not to take everything personally, which is an ongoing thing for me, and being organized, because the longer I'm in this business, when I first started, I was a stand-up comic, and that was it. I wrote stand-up, I performed stand-up, I listened to it, I rewrote it, I performed it. That's all I did. And I do miss the simplicity of those days. But now I do so many different things. I'm working on this show, getting ready to put it up in a theater. I'm working on my stand-up still. I'm an actor. I do voiceovers, and I have branched out. So it takes a lot of organization and a calendar that has a lot of different colors in it.
Thank you for answering that. Those are great tips. My final question is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Just love yourself a little bit more. love it and accept yourself for who you are, because you're so unique, and you're so special in who you are. Nobody is going to be who you are.
Right.
And just accept. If you can't love yourself, accept yourself at least.
That's some great advice. Cathy, this has been great. Any closing words? You get the last words. That if there's anything else you'd like to share or say.
From me only.
You only.
No, it's been wonderful talking to you. You're so well prepared.
Thank you.
Which is really nice. I
appreciate
that. I think you're better prepared than I am, to tell you the truth. And I just had a wonderful time being here, and I hope that I've reached someone in some helpful way.
I'm sure that you have. And
Good.
The beauty of this show, besides being live, is the archive. So this will live on in your words and insight, and your truth. It gets to be shared, over and over again. So I appreciate your transparency and your honesty.
Absolutely. And please, to anyone who's listening who wants to ask me a question or have a conversation with me, there's a way to get in touch with me on my website. Feel free to. That's
good to know. And I know that you mean that. So everybody take that invitation seriously and take it to heart. You don't need to be alone in your struggles or your curiosity.
Yeah, not at all.
Something you want to know.
Happy to be here.
Or if you just want to reach out to Cathy and just say something nice about her comedy as well. It doesn't have to be
it's always nice
a serious reach out. Yeah, that never gets old. So anyway, Cathy, it's great to see you and catch up. And I want to thank you. Yeah, thanks. And for spending the time with me. Dr. Lisa, as always, you are just a gem and bring such a great perspective to the show. And you keep all the plates spinning so I can focus on the conversation, which I really appreciate.
No, I do want to just do a plug. Please go to Cathy's website and go to her calendar. Right now, it kind of just says pandemic happened. But does this show make me look fat? Keep your eye out for when that is going to hit theaters. And please tell me that you're going to be doing it in a theater in LA. So
that's where I'm going to be doing it first.
Okay,
great. Yes.
We will be there. Yeah.
Great.
Please.
Great.
Please let us know. And we'll remind people on the air as well, even just to give a shout out in the intro.
Great. Thank you
show.
So much.
Of course. I can't wait. That's going to be wonderful to see that. Yeah.
Like I just gave myself a date.
Great.
Cool.
And again, to our virtual audience and the people who are in the room with us now, we really appreciate you so much. And to everybody else who's listening, we appreciate you. And I want to encourage you to stay safe and stay inspired. And we'll see everybody next week. So thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Lisa. Bye-bye.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.